back on the air. Because we've known each other for over 20 years. I know you as a friend, and here's something I didn't know, is that you're funny.
On paper, nothing about Stephen Colbert's downfall made sense. After dominating network late night for 9 straight seasons, America's highest-rated host suddenly found himself without a future at CBS. Just days before the announcement, Colbert publicly accused his own corporate parent of paying what he called a big fat bribe. That probably didn't help. But then Stephen Colbert, having parted ways with CBS, finally admitted why he declined Jimmy Kimmel's offer to join his show. This story gets weirder the deeper one goes. To make sense of it all, we need to start from the very beginning. The king of late night, who didn't lose the ratings war. Imagine waking up to learn that the most-watched host in network late night had just lost his show. That is exactly what happened when CBS announced on July 17, 2025, that The Late Show with Stephen Colbert would end when his contract expired in May of 2026. The announcement stunned Hollywood because Colbert was not being canceled after a ratings collapse or a string of failures. Quite the opposite. For 9 consecutive television seasons, The Late Show had finished as the highest-rated network late-night program in the coveted 11:30 time slot, consistently outperforming NBC's The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon, and ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live. The story becomes even stranger when you look at where Colbert began. When he inherited David Letterman's legendary desk on September 8, 2015, expectations were enormous. Letterman had hosted The Late Show for more than 2 decades. Colbert, meanwhile, played a fictional conservative pundit on Comedy Central's The Colbert Report. That was not a recipe for massive success. Early on, Jimmy Fallon comfortably led the ratings race, thanks in part to celebrity games and viral YouTube clips. But Colbert gradually reinvented himself. As the political climate intensified during Donald Trump's first presidential campaign and presidency, his opening monologues became sharper, more topical, and more widely discussed. By the end of the 2016 through 2017 television season, Colbert had overtaken Fallon, beginning a remarkable run that would last nearly a decade. By the time the cancellation was announced, even CBS executives had publicly acknowledged Colbert's dominance. George Cheeks, president and chief executive officer of CBS, had previously described him as the network's #1 performer at 11:30. Yet when CBS explained why The Late Show was ending, it insisted the decision had nothing to do with ratings, performance, or the show's content. Instead, the company described it as purely a financial decision driven by the changing economics of late-night television. That explanation surprised many observers because it challenged one of television's oldest assumptions, that strong ratings guarantee survival. Behind the scenes, however, the television business had changed dramatically. Traditional advertising revenue had been shrinking for years as audiences migrated to streaming platforms, social media, and on-demand viewing. But was this really the cause? The monologue that changed everything. 3 days before one of the most shocking announcements in late-night television history, Stephen Colbert walked onto the stage of The Late Show and turned his attention away from politicians, celebrities, or rival networks. Instead, he targeted his own corporate parent. The moment immediately stood out because comedians rarely criticized the company signing their paychecks on national television. Colbert's subject was Paramount Global's decision to settle a lawsuit brought by Donald Trump over CBS News editing of a 60 Minutes interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris. Paramount agreed to pay $16 million, with the money designated for Trump's future presidential library rather than being paid directly to him. Trump alleged that 60 Minutes deceptively edited Harris's interview to favor her during the presidential campaign, while CBS maintained that its editing followed standard broadcast practices and denied any wrongdoing. Many legal analysts questioned the strength of Trump's claims, making Paramount's decision to settle particularly surprising. The timing was particularly intriguing because Paramount was simultaneously pursuing a multi-billion-dollar merger with Skydance Media, a deal requiring approval from federal regulators, including the Federal Communications Commission. Naturally, settling the lawsuit gave the impression that corporate interests were taking precedence over editorial independence, even though Paramount denied any connection between the settlement and the merger process. Colbert wasted little time weighing in. Opening The Late Show, he told viewers, as someone who has always been a proud employee of this network, I am offended. Referring to Paramount's settlement, Colbert called it a big fat bribe. The audience erupted, but the remark landed differently outside the theater. It was one thing for a comedian to mock a politician. It was another to accuse his own parent company of making a payment that, in his view, appeared designed to smooth the path toward regulatory approval. Just 3 days later, on July 17, 2025, CBS announced that The Late Show with Stephen Colbert would end when his contract expired in May of 2026. The reaction spread far beyond Hollywood. Fellow comedians, including Jimmy Kimmel and Jon Stewart, publicly defended Colbert. David Letterman criticized CBS's decision. Senator Elizabeth Warren and other lawmakers questioned the circumstances. But the decision had been made. A billion-dollar deal behind the curtain. Paramount Global's proposed merger with Skydance Media was valued at roughly $8 billion and promised to reshape one of America's oldest entertainment companies. Announced in July of 2024, the agreement would place Skydance founder David Ellison in control of the combined company, with backing from Redbird Capital Partners. The merger involved one of the country's largest broadcast networks, one of its most influential news divisions, and government regulators whose approval was essential before the deal could move forward. That approval process immediately raised the stakes. Because CBS owns dozens of local television stations licensed by the federal government, the transaction required review by the Federal Communications Commission. At the same time, other federal agencies examined different aspects of the merger under antitrust and communications laws. Then several high-profile events collided almost simultaneously. Donald Trump filed a lawsuit against CBS over the editing of a 60 Minutes interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris. Paramount ultimately agreed to settle the case for $16 million, despite continuing to deny wrongdoing. Days later, Stephen Colbert publicly criticized that settlement during The Late Show, calling it a big fat bribe. Within another few days, CBS announced that Colbert's show would end when his contract expired. Throughout the same period, Paramount continued working toward regulatory approval of the Skydance merger. Adding to the scrutiny were comments from FCC Chairman Brendan Carr after the merger was approved. Carr said the new ownership had expressed a desire to reorient CBS News and address what they viewed as bias within the organization. Those remarks immediately fueled debate because they suggested significant editorial changes could be coming to one of America's most prominent news divisions. Soon afterward, leadership changes accelerated inside CBS News. Longtime executives departed, including CBS News President Wendy McMahon and 60 Minutes executive producer Bill Owens, both of whom left amid broader disagreements over editorial independence and the company's direction during the merger process. One appointment became especially controversial. Journalist Bari Weiss was selected as editor-in-chief of CBS News under the new ownership. Weiss, a former New York Times opinion editor and founder of the Free Press, has long been a polarizing figure because of her criticism of ideological conformity in major newsrooms and her outspoken views on issues including free speech and Israel. The broader picture is remarkable. A late-night comedy show, a presidential lawsuit, a multi-billion-dollar merger, federal regulators, newsroom leadership changes, and fierce political debate all unfolded at the same moment, revealing just how deeply entertainment, journalism, corporate strategy, and American politics had become intertwined. Within hours of CBS revealing that The Late Show with Stephen Colbert would end when his contract expired, what could have been a routine corporate decision erupted into one of the largest public disputes the late-night television industry had seen in years. The reaction extended far beyond fans disappointed to lose a favorite host. Fellow comedians, veteran broadcasters, journalists, politicians, and media watchdogs all weighed in. While CBS continued insisting that the decision was driven solely by economics, many of the industry's most recognizable figures openly questioned whether the official explanation told the entire story. Some of Colbert's strongest support came from the people who understood late-night television better than anyone else. Jimmy Kimmel, Jon Stewart, Seth Meyers, and other comedians quickly defended their longtime colleague. Kimmel became one of Colbert's most vocal allies. Rather than airing a fresh episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live opposite Colbert's farewell, Kimmel chose to broadcast a rerun instead, encouraging viewers to spend the evening watching Colbert's final show. It was an extraordinary gesture. Later, Jimmy Kimmel revealed that he had invited Stephen Colbert to become one of the rotating celebrity guest hosts on Jimmy Kimmel Live during his annual summer hiatus. For most television personalities, it would have been the perfect way to stay in the spotlight while deciding what came next. But Colbert quietly declined. Speaking to Variety, Kimmel explained that Colbert simply felt it was too soon. Colbert simply chose to disappear from the late-night spotlight almost as suddenly as he had been forced to leave it. Kimmel, however, made one thing unmistakably clear. The invitation wasn't a one-time offer. "Anytime you want to host," he said, "I'll gladly step aside." This gesture was not offered in a vacuum. Behind the nightly ratings battles, late-night hosts had increasingly become allies navigating an industry that was changing faster than ever before. Kimmel understood those pressures firsthand. Like Colbert, he had spent years turning his opening monologues into some of television's sharpest political commentary. Although Kimmel had joked about presidents from both parties throughout his career, his criticism of Donald Trump became particularly relentless. Trump regularly fired back on social media, branding Kimmel terrible, untalented, and claiming his ratings were collapsing. Yet, much like Colbert, Kimmel's audience remained remarkably resilient. Their public feud became one of the defining rivalries between a president and a late-night television host, with each new monologue often triggering another response from Trump within hours. Colbert's relationship with Trump was arguably even more intense. When he took over The Late Show in September of 2015, his program initially resembled a traditional network talk show. But after Trump's election, Colbert leaned heavily into political satire, frequently dedicating large portions of his opening monologues to the White House, congressional investigations, impeachment proceedings, election controversies, and Trump's legal battles. The strategy transformed his program into appointment viewing. By the end of the 2016 through 2017 television season, he had overtaken Jimmy Fallon to become the highest-rated network late-night host, a position he would hold for 9 consecutive seasons. Trump responded over the years with repeated attacks on Truth Social and other platforms, calling Colbert boring, talentless, and predicting that his ratings would soon collapse. Instead, the opposite happened. The ratings climbed. This made Colbert's eventual cancellation all the more surprising. He was not alone, though. Kimmel's own experience also gave him a unique perspective on what Colbert was going through. In September of 2025, ABC abruptly suspended production of Jimmy Kimmel Live after a monologue in which he discussed the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Contrary to many headlines that followed, Kimmel did not joke about or celebrate Kirk's death. Instead, his criticism was directed at what he described as efforts by some MAGA figures to immediately politicize the killing by portraying the alleged gunman as anything other than one of their own supporters. During the monologue, Kimmel argued that many in MAGA land were trying to score political points from the tragedy. Nevertheless, the remarks triggered an immediate political firestorm, with conservative commentators, politicians, and major ABC affiliate owners including Nexstar and Sinclair accusing him of being insensitive. The backlash quickly escalated beyond social media and into the corporate world, eventually leading ABC to suspend the show indefinitely while executives assessed the situation. The suspension immediately became a national story. Supporters argued that Kimmel had been criticizing the political reaction to the murder rather than the murder itself. Critics insisted his timing was inappropriate regardless of intent. More than 400 actors, comedians, writers, producers, and other entertainment figures signed an American Civil Liberties Union-backed open letter condemning the suspension as an attack on free expression. Even a number of conservatives who disagreed with Kimmel's politics publicly defended his right to say what he believed without being taken off the air. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump celebrated ABC's decision, while FCC Chairman Brendan Carr publicly criticized Kimmel's comments, although Carr later denied that federal officials had pressured the network into suspending the show. Just 6 days later, ABC reversed course. The company announced that after thoughtful conversations with Kimmel, Jimmy Kimmel Live would return to the air. According to the network, the original suspension had been intended to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country, and executives concluded that the show should resume following discussions with its host. The decision came after days of intense criticism from civil liberties groups, fellow comedians, journalists, and many viewers. Kimmel addressed the controversy head-on upon his return, fighting back tears at times. During an emotional opening monologue, he told viewers, "It was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it." He reminded audiences that he had posted a message of sympathy to Charlie Kirk's family immediately after the shooting and said he still meant every word of it. Kimmel explained that his criticism had never been aimed at Kirk himself, but at those he believed were exploiting the tragedy for political gain. He also thanked supporters from across the political spectrum, saying he was especially grateful to people who disagreed with his views but defended his right to express them anyway. Viewed alongside Stephen Colbert's cancellation, the two episodes reinforced a broader perception that late-night television had entered a far more precarious era. Both hosts had spent years as some of Donald Trump's most persistent television critics. Both became targets of Trump's public attacks. Both later found themselves at the center of major controversies involving their networks. The remarkable sequence of events has fueled an ongoing debate about whether political pressure, corporate interests, and changing media economics are making it increasingly difficult for outspoken late-night hosts to do what they have done for decades: use comedy to challenge the powerful. But what about the man himself? Well, that's another story worth telling. The man behind the desk. Long before Stephen Colbert became the most recognizable face in American late-night television, his life was forever changed by a tragedy. On September 11, 1974, 10-year-old Stephen was at home in Charleston, South Carolina, when Eastern Airlines Flight 212 crashed while attempting to land in Charlotte, North Carolina. On board were his father, Dr. James Colbert, then dean of the Yale University School of Medicine, and his two older brothers, Peter and Paul. The aircraft struck trees just short of the runway during heavy rain and low visibility, killing 72 of the 82 people aboard. Decades later, he would describe the event as something that became part of him forever. The loss profoundly shaped the man audiences would later come to know. Colbert has often credited his mother, Lorna Colbert, with holding the family together after the crash, describing her resilience and sense of humor as extraordinary. Rather than turning away from faith, he embraced it, remaining a practicing Catholic throughout his life. In a widely discussed 2019 conversation with Anderson Cooper, who had also experienced devastating family loss, Colbert reflected on grief in a way that surprised many viewers. He said he had learned to be grateful for the thing I wish had not happened, explaining that suffering had deepened his empathy and appreciation for life. Before network television came calling, Colbert built his reputation in the world of political satire. After studying improvisational comedy at Chicago's famed Second City, he joined The Daily Show under Jon Stewart in 1997, quickly becoming one of the program's standout correspondents. In October of 2005, Comedy Central launched The Colbert Report, where he played an exaggerated, self-important conservative television pundit inspired in part by personalities such as Bill O'Reilly. The brilliance of the character lay in its commitment. Colbert never broke the illusion, allowing viewers to laugh at the absurdity while simultaneously questioning the media culture surrounding them. The show's popularity earned him multiple Emmy Awards and established him as one of the country's most influential satirists. Perhaps no moment better demonstrated Colbert's willingness to court controversy than the White House Correspondents' Dinner on April 29, 2006. Standing just feet away from President George W. Bush and members of his administration, Colbert delivered a blistering satirical speech that mocked the Iraq War, political messaging, and the relationship between government and the press. The room itself responded with uncomfortable silence, but the speech quickly spread online. Historians of media now frequently point to that performance as a turning point, illustrating how online audiences could transform an awkward live event into a cultural phenomenon long after the banquet had ended.